We're ditching the quick fixes and diving deep into what really makes men thrive. You're listening to the Man Unmedicated podcast with Rob Kress.
So this week's podcast features our very own Rob Kress. And many of you know Rob is our functional pharmacist who provides lab reviews and protocols on your 15-week journey. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's fun being on this side of the table, although it's the same side of the table.
It is. So let me just introduce you again. So Rob is a pharmacist and a functional medicine specialist. And Rob took his passion for a holistic approach to health and became board certified in clinical nutrition, the art of pharmaceutical compounding, primal health coaching, yoga teacher training, and he's also a level 2 MoveNat trainer. And Rob leads our men's health program and consults with patients through the soul of medicine, as well as educates other medical practitioners on functional medicine. Rob was recently named one of the top 50 pharmacists in the U.S. Yay! Rob lectures, writes, and podcasts regularly on the topic of lifestyle and integrative care, and is a dog dad to his amazing mini Aussie Pilar. That me out of right now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Today, the title of our podcast is Man Unmedicated, Empowering the Healthy Male Archetype. That's a cool title.
It is. It is. And I think it's pretty apropos for the times that we are in, really for men and women, to be honest with you.
Can you share with us what Man Unmedicated is, and is there a relationship to that title to your own story?
I love the focus of recognizing pharmacon, right? So anything could be a medicine, anything could be a poison. And I think we're in a time of age where when we say medicated, or when I say medicated, it can be medicated to anything that helps you not feel, that numbs you out. So it could be too much internet. It could be drinking. It could be being a workaholic, whatever it is. And I think we have a lot of that, which is actually stepping in the way of men actually finding their true potential and actually living life engaged, right? So there's a lot of checking out going on. Me personally, as I look down this road, and actually you were there, we had a conversation with my mother last summer. And I was to learn that when she gave birth, she was under total anesthesia. And you looked to me like, what? And my sister was like, yeah, that was a thing in the 70s, right? So it's kind of wild when you think about it. You come into this earth without that, right? That nurturing, possibly. I came into it through a vessel that was actually not feeling. And, I've learned my whole life, or I haven't learned my whole life, but I've been influenced that pain is a bad thing. You stay away from pain. You go to the dentist that hates pain because they don't want to see you in pain. Pain's bad, pain's bad, pain's bad. And I don't think it was really a coincidence that my path was to become a pharmacist who literally aids in medication for people, oftentimes relieving pain. And I've had my own personal lower back stuff that literally got me into functional medicine. But that's basically it. And recognizing that, through pain actually oftentimes is the portal, and the path is through the pain, and we can modulate it. So that's where Man Unmedicated comes from. It's basically recognizing where we are in life and how we can kind of prepare ourselves on our journey to face these challenging things that we once thought we were supposed to avoid.
Can you go into that back pain story? Because I think that was so profound, opening for you, a profound connection for you with my body. You tell that story quite often because I think it's significant. I also think it's common. It occurs quite often. Lower back pain is a very typical pain that people feel, and it's chronic, and it ends up usually being an issue that sort of never goes away, and that ends up needing surgery or more intensive, invasive procedures to deal with. And the way that you discovered what the portal that pain opened for you was pretty profound.
It was, and it took a long time to get there. So it wasn't right away. So, I come from, I like to say, a family of bad backs, right? So a lot of times when we go through our growth, through our family, through our, whether it's our community or whatever it might be, we have these influencing factors that shape who we think we are, but not necessarily who we are. So I saw a sister who had actually 3 spinal fusions, a mother that was always late, not always, but often laid up with a bad back, and a father who actually had back surgery. So there was this belief pattern that it was up there for me to grasp onto, and even an identity. So I found myself in my youth, even playing sports. Like for some reason, one particular time the back would go out and it would get really stiff, and other times it would not. Or it would be that example, I was just picking up a sock, right? But we always blame it to this thing. So I just thought that was part of my thing. It was the Achilles heel of the family, right? It was the Kress curse or whatever you want to call it. So as my path went on, like I ended up in Jackson, Wyoming, and it's a place where you really don't want to have any bad backs because you want to enjoy what the outside brings you, from snowboarding to hiking to mountain biking and all that. But I saw a chiropractor there, and it was very interesting because I don't know if anyone can attune to this, but the chiropractor took an x-ray of me. It was the first time anyone ever did that. And I've only saw chiropractors. I was never really one to go in the doc route. But I saw the x-ray and I had these herniations all up and down my spine, from my neck to my back, all up and down. So he pointed where the pain was. He goes, you see those herniations? He goes, that's what that is. You got herniated discs. That's causing the pain down your legs. It's sciatic pain. And so then I went into physical therapy with him. And it was pretty intensive physical therapy. It was great. I mean, it was stuff I liked the attention, whatever. But what I didn't think at the time was, okay, I had herniations in the lower back, but I also have up my upper back and even my neck, but I wasn't having any issues there. So, I didn't even ask why there. So my path goes on, and, I'd be on like certain anti-inflammatories, and I would rehab it and do all the stuff. It would still find times where it would go out on me. So then it's really interesting, this path. So then we had this like world-renowned orthopedic surgeon come to town, back surgeon. So I'm seeing this back surgeon, and suddenly I got I think it's time for surgery. It was literally like I was waiting to hear this. And I had this identity to it as well. I mean, I was working a pharmacy counter, and when other people would come up with lower back pain, we had this relatability. It was like this connection, like, I see you, right? Further ingraining and holding on to the identity that one was. That was really part of me. And I used to say it was kind of filling a void within me. So I went through the back surgery, and then it was a really good winter, like for snow. And when that's happened, you don't want to be cross-country skiing. You want to be on your snowboard, which I did. So 6 weeks after surgery, I hopped back on my snowboard, not advised by the back surgeon, and everything was great. And there was no problems whatsoever. That spring went down to Costa Rica for 2 to 3 weeks and beat it up all I could, right? And there was no problems. Everything was great. I was away from work for that long time. Right when I walked right back into the pharmacy, sciatic right down my leg, it dropped me to the floor, literally. I was like, wait a second. All I did was open a door and step through it. So that was that moment. I'm like, okay, it's not just a physical thing anymore. So in my mind, I remembered like years before that, I'd be in Philadelphia driving to high school, and Howard Stern was on the radio. And he talked about this guy, Dr. John Sarno, who cured his back pain. He wrote a book called The Mind Body Prescription. I got the book, and and John even writes in there, sometimes when you have an awareness that your emotions can actually lead to this pain, you're basically your subconscious trying to divert an emotion that it doesn't want to deal with. It doesn't want your conscious mind to deal with. That awareness can actually relieve pain. And that is what it did. It was like, boom. So that kind of got me on my path of this mind body, and how our subconscious mind, through not wanting us to, once again, feel pain, see pain, deal with pain, will divert attention to it. And what it does is, scientifically speaking, it creates ischemia. It creates a reduction of blood flow and oxygen to an area that elicits a pain response. And it literally can change the physicality of the body. So it truly is physical pain. It's not just in the head, but it's being created. So at that point, I was like, okay, I had the surgery. Everything should be good. My back bothered me. It knocked me down. But now I had this connection, and that kind of just set me on everything through functional medicine.
That's really empowering too, for one to discover that, because I think sometimes what happens is when it runs in the family, my mom had this, my dad had this, diabetes, thyroid disease, history of cancer, therefore I'll get it. And there becomes this learned helplessness that goes along with that. So if you feel it's in the genetics, you're going to get it. Therefore, you don't really need to intervene, or any intervention you do, you're automatically going to get it. And what we're seeing now, and what we've seen for a while, is that that's not true, right? So the epigenetics or beyond genetics, what we're seeing now is that the environment that you live in, and this includes mindset, what you're talking about, also bathing yourselves in a nice, healthy environment has influence over the expression of genes. So in that way, we want to encourage people to delve into all of these things because genetics is really, what was that study from ND Anderson, the cancer center in Texas, and it was 97% lifestyle, 3% genetic. So that's from, a major institution, a conventional institution, even saying that, which I definitely believe, and we are seeing that, right, in even in studies. So mindset, belief is important also in the expression of those genes, well, whether they'll be expressed or not expressed.
Mindset and subconscious mindset. So it's definitely the thoughts we think, but also it says thoughts that we don't know that we're thinking, those emotions that we're feeling, which I think is really big.
So how does one get to those? Because I think a lot of patients have trouble that if it's not in obvious on, the gross X-ray or the MRI or the CT, if it's not something super tangible, and therefore it doesn't exist. And I feel that a lot of times patients have trouble making that connection between mind body because it seems so ethereal. Thoughts are not, necessarily something that you can pick up on an ultrasound or a blood test. So how would you suggest, and how did you start to make that connection tangible, if you will, if that's...
So for me, my next step, so John's books were great, Healing Back Pain, Mind Body Prescription. The awareness, when I noticed that, could this be true? Like when I asked the question to myself, maybe, sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief in life. So I would say that's step one. Just suspend your disbelief and see what happens. I immediately felt relief. So for me, that was proof, right? So I'm like, okay, let me look down this pathway. And this is really interesting because that other family of bad backs that I say I have, a mom, a dad, and a sister, they don't believe it still. They don't feel that the subconscious mind has any influence over it, which is really interesting. So I've tried with them and I couldn't get them to see it, but I think it's one's experience. So first of all, it is that awareness, the suspending the disbelief. And then what I did, I got on to like Louise Hay back then. So, she had her book where she would talk about parts of the body and what it meant. So the lower back meant control issues. Now, you tell someone that they have control issues, what are they immediately going to do? And you might know me to be defensive. What would I, yeah. So it's like, no, not me, right? Yeah, we did hard-headed. But then there's still that thing, like I want to go to that point, like, okay, let's suspend the disbelief. So I'm always walking with that, right? What if it's possible? So I started looking at control issues, and lo and behold, I'm like, I would see when the back would tweak, right? When I would get a little stiff, what's going on in my life then? So all that kind of connected the dots, or either looking backwards, when in my life did it happen? When this, I was laid up and I was going back to the chiropractor, what components? It's almost like going back to like astrological transits in a way to see what was happening in your life at that point. And for me, I know the one part was finals in pharmacy school. And I remember I was living in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and I was trying to take that damn train down to Philadelphia, and I just could hardly even sit. So it was always these things. And now this is the important focus, though. A lot of people say it's stress. It's not so much stress as it's still an emotion that's being held down that the body doesn't want to recognize. I think that's still the instigating factor. So then it allows us to go into there, because I'm not an angry guy, right? I mean, I don't get frustrated. I don't have that. And that was another part of my path to realize that. And, this is even in a lot of conversations with you. So this is a path as we go forward. The recognizing that we might still have emotions within us that might not be socially okay to say, such as anger, letting it out. What I like to say is energy's got to move. So we got to recognize we have in all directions. So what's the best way? So that was literally my path. It was kind of suspend your disbelief, recognize when things would, or in the past when they did, and see those associations.
That's some good advice, because I think a lot of people come to us at sort of the end of trying everything, including naturally. So they've done the meds, can't tolerate that, going to something like supplements or tinctures or body work, etc. That still doesn't work. And it's not those things are not valuable, but there is a layer beyond the physical that needs to be explored. And if we think about holistic medicine, it's mind, body, spirit, heart, psyche, emotions, all of that put together. And if we're only treating the physical, that's one piece of the pie. So a lot of people have maybe mastered that physical piece or tried that, it's still not better. Then it's time then to look at the other pieces of the pie and the other parts that could be contributing to this. And therein usually lies the answer.
Yeah, completely. Environmental, everything. So it's just uncovering all that.
Could you talk about your new program that's going to be released, the Apollo Way? And you talk about your 5 peaks of wellness: physical, mental, emotional, intuitive, and spiritual, which is awesome. And this is a men's program. I kind of joke sometimes that, no, I mean, this is true. I don't see men in my practice anymore. And I did. And, I feel like we have our own sets of issues that I can relate to because I'm a woman, and men also do too. And it made sense to me that you would lead this program. I feel that as a woman, if I'm leading this, it is very physical. It is very, okay, here are your numbers. Here's this, let's work on this. But you go beyond that as a men's health coach because of all the things beyond the physical that men experience that I don't necessarily know. I mean, I could be the receiving end of that, but from a personal experience, I wouldn't know, nor am I going to try to pretend that I know that. So first, could you tell us about Apollo and then why you named this Apollo's Way?
Yeah, I remember this is a few years in the making, I guess we could say, because you and I were actually communicating at the time, like, what could it be named? And mythology has slowly started to actually step into my life, and looking back into it, the relationships, the relatability, and getting into even the practice of medicine, because it really falls in line with who we are, and most likely when we all have our individual myths, why we're here. So started looking at, okay, let's look at different gods, mythological gods, and Apollo came up. And, it was literally the individual that was almost like a modern day Renaissance man. I mean, hit everything from the intellect to the emotions to nature to athleticism to leadership. So I was like, that's it. Now, must have been 3 or 4 years ago we were talking about this, I think. And I honestly think the time from then to here, as it feels like it was in the blink of an eye, it just was that time for me to continue on the path to develop like those components, those aspects, to experiment with them, or just to have life bring them in front of me some more. So that's why. I mean, basically, it's kind of like that individual that has a lot of boxes checked to be a balanced, authentic individual, and the approach that we take. Yeah.
So Apollo is this figure who is identified with healing, the sun, light, archery, music, arts, knowledge, and protection of the young. It's interesting to have these archetypes as a way of understanding self, particularly if you identify with them. So could you talk about some of the challenges that the modern man faces today, their health challenges beyond that? And also, could you talk about this might be a really long question, or answer, but what keeps them from getting help or joining a program like this? Or, usually I have a lot of female patients who are like, can you see my partner? Can you see my, husband, boyfriend? But it is sort of this dragging them in process. And once they're there, it is a bit of a challenge to, get them to continue. And could you speak from a man's perspective? Okay.
I think there's a number of different reasons why. Now, first and foremost, and I'll go with myself, sometimes we don't see it within ourselves. Like there's an issue. It's almost like life takes control. So something that really sparked in me years ago, I read a Thoreau quote, and it was, "The masses of men are leading quiet lives of desperation," right? So to me, that says we're in an unhappy state, but the pain hasn't gotten too great, and sometimes we don't know where to go. So I think direction is needed. Like there is actually a way. And you can also, there could be an egoic thing. There's nothing wrong with me. I mean, how many times have I said that? I don't got trauma, whatever it is. Like we don't face it or realize it. So those play big roles. The reasons why that they don't. But what's very interesting, the ones that they do, and this is a surprise to me as I start seeing more and more men in the practice, it's how real things can actually get, and how in front of me, someone might just get, teared up. And, it's something that like, it's not like a dude thing to do. Right. But I think men are looking for this and they're looking for that space to exhale and to also, and, to understand we can, physically, some of the chief complaints are lethargy, tiredness, brain fog, right? But why? I go to the doctor, he checks my cholesterol, he gives me a statin drug. Well, that's going to make some things worse, honestly, side effect wise. He checks my prostate and looks at testosterone levels. Everything should be fine, but they don't go deeper. So a lot of times they go to a practitioner, they do their general checkup, and they're told nothing's wrong. But and they're not as readily to admit that something's wrong, but I think that time is coming. Now, another thing that I think suggests that men are raising their hand is how many online like medication things are out there for like ED, for testosterone. We're now seeing mini clinics for testosterone popping up around. So men are looking for ways to do it, but they're also doing it so they can do it online. They could do it on the phone. So they're not admitting that, okay, maybe I do have a problem. Maybe I'm not perfect. So all that plays into the role. So I think until you start to see someone similar to you or another man, then you start to recognize, okay, that's the thing.
So as a partner, as a woman, and you want your partner to go because, you see the fatigue or the disconnection, the weight gain, the et cetera, the slowing down, difficulty breathing when whatever is happening. These are some of the things women are concerned with in their partners, and they say something and then it's like it falls on deaf ears. So is there a way to create the portal? I mean, saying, I think you should get checked out, or what are the magic words? Can you give me some magic words here?
And I think what happens often,
ladies.
And I think what happens often now, so you got a guy and he's, if he's told these things, he's going to shut down or he's going to get defensive or he's not going to readily admit it. Plus, he's like, he might even be thinking, honestly, I've been trying, and nothing's working, right? So that would be one thing. As far as the words to say, one thing could be, and this is one thing I'll literally say is, how do you feel compared to when you were 20 years old in your lower 20s? Like, who is the you now compared to the you then? And is there any aspects you would like back? Because I think what happens is we just, as life goes on, we gain a few more pounds, we lose a little more energy, we become a little more apathetic. And suddenly over 10, 15, 20 years, it's like, I am a completely different person. And the wife or the partner might also be thinking, this is not the man I married, right? Which is often the case. So it's literally getting that person back. So as far as the magic words, I think literally it's like, who were you then that you would like to be now? Are there any aspects that you're missing in yourself would be a direction to go? Because I think a lot of times dudes can really get defensive or they don't want to deal with it. So they bury it.
And okay, so let's talk about that. Because what are the words? And I find this interesting because our intention is to help, right? And if we see suffering or pain or whatever, we just want to go in and help. So we make suggestions. And so what is it that a man hears? So we can say something, but how they interpret it and think that what we're saying and what they're hearing are not the same thing.
Correct. And I would say that's both ways in the relationship as well. And that probably has some influence on past stories, past relationships, past conversations, and everything that goes there. So, that would also be my question to you. What would a male partner, if he saw the same aspects, which is usually not the commonality, but it's out there, saw the same aspects in his female partner, how would he approach that so as not to offend, so as not to, right? So it's a delicate subject, I think, and a topic in both ways. In many ways, I would almost think it would be good to be like, let's be 100% honest and put everything down, and come face to face with that. But I think this is actually a big issue between parties in a relationship. How do you say that? Because as you just said, what you said isn't necessarily what they heard. And I think it also comes down to when it's said and how it's said. There's a lot of inflection of voices. Are we stressed at the time? Do we have a lot going on? Are we ready to be in that space?
Yeah, because I think it's also an inquiry, because if something were up, there are subtle messages of, I don't feel well, I'm tired, and then when it gets repetitive, maybe there's an inquiry of like, how can I support you? How can I help? What is it that you need? And there's a clarifying conversation also sometimes if it's repetitive of, how can I support you? Would you like me to just listen to you? Say this to me over and over again. And that's great, but you have 5 minutes to do that. And we can do it daily, but, or do you want me to help you find somebody to help you? What is it that you're trying to communicate to me about this? Just like women, we don't need you to fix everything. We just want you to listen. So sometimes it is just, can you just listen to me? Maybe it isn't a fixing kind of thing. So I think there are nuances in that conversation.
Yeah. And what you just said there, when you just said those initial words, how can I support you? Maybe you just want me to listen. Like that was like melted butter. Like that was like, right. And there's just a response to that. And it is in the inquiry. And I think it's not forcing and trying to fix it. I've got a doctor for you to go to. It's like, it literally is like for a man to hear. So one thing men don't often hear, especially when times can be challenging and tough. And I'm saying for females as well. But, I think a lot of men, sometimes they feel like, it is their job and, they're putting the weight of the world on their shoulders, the family, the friends. A lot of men will, people come to them. And what I like to say is, you're like the rock for everyone, but sometimes that rock gets slippery. So sometimes in that space, a man may just want to be asked, how are they doing? How are they feeling? Right? Because they don't often hear that. And that can open a lot. Or we could do this 5 minutes. I'm just here to listen. Is that what you want of me? Or how can I support you? I think those are just golden words right there.
I agree with you. And I've been on some conversations with some of your male coaches who even express that they haven't gotten an opportunity to express their needs because they're always trying to help and fix, because that's a socialization for men, right? It's not really their needs getting met, but meeting everybody else's needs. Right. Which is the same thing for women also, that we kind of honestly didn't really think about that as an issue for men, because I'm just trying to get my own needs.
Well, and that's what happens. But, it's true. And sometimes what happens is when the male doesn't even think, because they don't know that. They don't know that's what they need. They don't know they actually need to be heard. Right. Because they're here letting everyone else. And Lily, to say, can I have that, is a lot of times in their mind, it's a big step to take, right? So then if someone actually says to them, I'd like to hear from you, they probably won't even find the words at that time because they don't know there is that space. So there might be even like prep work to that. Like it's a real thing. We all need to be heard, and it's an important thing for everyone's health and well-being. And I think what you just hit on, because we have had some of those, coaches that we've talked to, and that was a similarity. That was a common thread that we see. That's not my space. It's not my job. I'm supposed to listen to everyone else and hold space for everyone and realize I'm not supposed to fix everything.
So what are some of the challenges that the modern man faces, health challenges that you see in your practice?
Not in practice, but if you look globally or even nationwide, suicide's been on the rise big time from the end of the 1990s to, I think it was 2020, it was up like 26%. So that's a big one. Men make up 50% of the population, but 80% of suicides are actually men. So if we want to take it to that end, that's a big one. And I think that falls in line with them not knowing there's a space to be heard. Right. So it's like reach out. It's not an easy thing. So I think even as a society, we had to make that more open and acceptable to do that. From that, it's metabolic issues. Right. So cholesterol levels, weight gain. And the problem is when people get into that realm, oftentimes when you have medication therapy, they're not properly balanced. So they get put on a statin drug. Well, that's going to make them feel tired and crappy and drop their testosterone even further. So now they want to feel better about themselves. So they're trying to work out, but lo and behold, they can't build muscle. They can't lose weight. So that's a challenge in its own right. Another really, really big thing is thyroid. We always look at thyroid as kind of a female thing, right? I mean, and it is. It's like 80% of hypothyroidism is females, 70, 80%. But there's a big portion of men that are having issues that we're seeing that more and more now. We're even seeing Hashimoto's playing a role. And what's interesting is if you can fix that thyroid hormone, androgen levels, testosterone levels can actually go back to normal levels as well. The issue of stress, right? And I mean, this is our whole society, the vitality. You've got a lot of men that used to operate on a type A paradigm, and suddenly they're like not that person anymore. Why is that? So energy, lack of sleep, brain fog is a common one as well. So these are the common kind of physiological things that we're dealing with that we're trying to work with.
So that whole adrenal pathway, though, is something that's really huge in men. And so, the biggest clue that we're seeing now with the low T to low testosterone, for example, and with the whole pregnenolone steal pathway, that when a man, even in his 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even his 20s, having low testosterone, that is a big red flag of running those adrenals into the ground, because technically andropause in men is in their 80s, right? Yeah, when we're seeing that in a young man, we really have to start addressing that HPA axis. And so, there's a lot of, like you said, pressure, there's a lot of stress, overwhelm, and your opening line with that question about suicide, I mean, the inability really societally for a man to express his emotions. What do you do then? It's easier for a woman to, or more acceptable anyway, to express her emotions. But heaven forbid if, there's more than anger, but there's sadness and disappointment and all guilt, all of those kinds of things that are in the mix. And there's not really a receptacle or a comprehension or a understanding for men, even young boys, I will say that, for that, because they're trained very early to man up and you're the man of the house and don't be a, XYZ and all these kinds of derogative name-calling things if they do express emotion, which, by the way, is a human experience. So that would explain quite a bit of what you're experiencing. So is that in your programs, and I've even heard you say this, how does it make you feel? How does it feel, right? And you have become this, and your programs have become a safe container for men actually to release that. How many men have expressed emotion with you in your presence? That's right.
Yeah. And to me, I was actually kind of surprised, and I was also glad and grateful. I mean, because it's what needs to be done. As you said, like it's a human experience. We all have emotions, and to suppress them, emotions are medicine. Releasing of the emotions are medicine. So when we're suppressing that time, energy's got to move. It's going to go somewhere. So, it's the expression of the emotions. And then it's also, okay, what are you going to do now with the emotions? So that can come back to the physical, right? That's one of the peaks that we talk about. And it's how you're going to move that energy. And it's dialing in on what would be best for that individual. Some people might be told, you know what, you just need to sit and meditate. Not in the mood to meditate. Maybe I need to hit a heavy bag, or maybe I need to go do sprints and stuff like that. So it's really finding that individual where it is. And at that point, what works best for them. I like to tell them, when you feel that energy get right here, this is when you got to move it. This is when it's got to dissipate. Either drop and do some push-ups, leave from the experience very nicely, because maybe it's an argument. Maybe say, right now I'm not going to be the best I can be. Something I'm still trying to learn. Let me step out for a few minutes and come back, because that's got to move, and that you're going to say something you regret. You're going to do something that you regret, and you're just not going to be present, whether it's a conversation or an incident that's happening. So, yeah, so emotions are really, really important to recognize. And, on the other side of that, the man not be a man, there's also a lot of men that have, like, what they have experienced is almost too passive in a way, right? Like, don't get angry. You can't do that. So it's another issue that I think a lot of men are facing. And a lot of this just comes down to who our leaders have been in our life. And, understanding they have come to the table with their own story as well and their own experiences.
So what has surprised you working with men in your practice?
The one thing is how the men that are into it, they're really ready to say, I'm looking for help, and I'm willing to take action and do what I need to do. And I'm dropping into my emotions, and it surprises them, and I've said it like a number of times, like they'll be like, oh, I don't know why that's hit me that way, And to me, it's something that's been dearly needed for a long time. So I'm glad, but also it did kind of surprise me, to be honest. And what's interesting is, in the past when I used to run my nutritional consultant practice, or even my kinesiology muscle testing, it never got to those levels. So it's just a different thing. And I don't know if it's just the program itself, what we're talking about, and what we're open to and recognizing. I think that has a lot to do with it. So it's creating that space of, listen, we're here to look at everything.
The biggest change that I've seen you make over the years was a connection to your own vulnerability, your own humanity, the ability to drop and examine some of those defenses, some of those judgments, even into your past experiences. You've had, interestingly, multiple deaths in your past as a kid around you with your friends, and you just kind of marched on, and almost like it wasn't a thing. It was a thing, but not a thing. And being able to examine that a little bit and be with that pain and the loss has, I believe, softened you. You're already you're a pretty nice dude, but I mean, I think what makes the program work is that you know how to hold that for yourself, and have allowed other people to help hold that for you. Therefore, you can create that container for other people. I think it's really hard sometimes with any coaching practice, if you haven't gone through it and you don't embody, the principles that you're teaching, is really important. And that said, men who are looking to transform, change, to start on the path, I mean, you kind of have to be ready, right? Because, and that's the thing too about getting someone into this program, your partner or whoever, a friend, into a program like this, they really do have to be ready. And it's okay that they're not at this point, and there just might need to be more light to be lived, or, like you said, the pain isn't great enough. Although you would really want to help them, or they may need it sometimes. I mean, that's hard to witness too. It's hard to see and watch that kind of destruction, if you will. Any advice around that?
Well, I think, and thank you for what you said there, because, I couldn't have done this. I mean, I could have put something out there 4 or 5 years ago, but it wouldn't have been the quality that it was, because, there was a lot of defensiveness. There was righteousness that often would come to the surface, which I couldn't see it. I would defend the hell out of it. And that's the interesting thing. It's like sometimes we will defend it because we can't see it. So it was just a lot of inward working. It's like and there is this certain humility that you have to come to, be like, shit, that's me, And I think even every one of those steps just takes you closer to who you are, because essentially, we are a product of the environment that is around us. We are trying to be the people to please our parents, the society, the culture, but we're never really in step with who we are. And it's been said that that's like the most common form of despair. And that's what we got there, right? So now it's okay. This first half of my life, I'd done it for everyone else or who I thought I was supposed to do. So now I'm kind of deshelling myself to kind of get into that authentic me. And what does that feel like? So I guess the words of the advice would be inner examination and sitting with it, and even asking others around you. And it's okay to have an ounce of humility or more, and it's real.
So if I ask you your own question, how was it before you started this work, how you felt at that moment compared to the man that you, or the young man that you were, not that you're an old man, like a younger man, prior to that comparison, and then the moment that you started the work until now? So those three points, because you've done quite a bit of work, and you are different, than when you started this journey several years ago.
So, I mean, if I was to sit and think about it, like who I am, like sitting in me and looking out to the world, it's literally a 180. But I think from the outside, I kind of seem like the similar person. I'm probably like the same Rob that most people that most people would casually know me as, right? The persona, the personality. But one thing that you said to earlier was, I had kind of more than average death, right? Like friends and stuff like that. And that would have been old Rob, right? So old Rob would be always using defense mechanisms or even ways to adapt. Like, death doesn't really bother me. I've had nothing. And, to bring a joke into it instead of actually sitting with the emotion. So I'll sit with feelings now. And now there's a point where maybe I don't, and I'll get into old ways, which happens, right? But I think there's this point in the case now, I've got this awareness where I'm kind of outside looking in sometimes when I see that. So that would be one distinct thing. I literally start to notice those things more, if that's kind of answering your question. But I'm trying to describe how it's like inside looking out, the world seems different to me. I'm more comfortable with him in his skin and with him who I am, without even externally having to be anything. Seeking validation. It's nice to hear positive words, but I used to be that person that was always, I'd pat myself on the back if no one else would. So I think that was another component to it as well.
Who are the types of men that you're looking for to join your programs or be a part of your community? What's your ideal client?
Ideal client would be people that are open to the mystery, meaning open to expect what they can't even see. So understand that you don't know what you don't know, and you can't see what you can't see. People that are willing to make changes, that's part of the functional medicine component. And that's what's really unique about this, because this is that masculine alchemy, right? This is that man unmedicated, but with a functional medicine twist. So it's the people that understand our physiology affects our emotions, our mental, our way of being, our intuition, like the way our gut feels to the world. And that's another thing that's been uncovered from old me to now. I would say when I was younger, I was able to pick up things. I was very intuitive and creative. And then I went through this 15-year period where all that was just kind of numb. So all that was kind of been awakened over this third step, which is kind of interesting. So men that would be open to all that, men that would be open to even looking at how they work out, right? maybe, so it's just being willing for change and really open to all that and being a co-creator in their own health and to understand that there's so much more potential within them that they even know. So to understand that their path forward could be limitless.
And you hold a space for that to happen until they can get it themselves is so amazing. And that's part of your magic as a human, is that you always really do see somebody's greatest potential versus the lowest common denominator, their highest potential. And so that's a gift, people, like, to have that in your life. And so, and this isn't just age, you don't have to be a certain age. These are not necessarily middle-aged men, for example. I mean, you have
No, it was just
20 and 30-year-olds in your practice.
Which surprised me, and that's what I was, I originally started creating this thing almost, we talk about Chiron's return, and we know for both of us, fortunately, we allowed it to be a growth process, an educational process, that 48 to 52 and what happens in life. So I thought that was going to be the market, those are the people. But I've been actually surprised, but really engaged and encouraged that we are seeing the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. So, it's that whole aspect, and it's really cool to see people in their 20s to be open to something like this, because I would have been completely shut down. Like said, no, I don't believe that, right? And I think we're dealing with different time of age right now, and we're dealing with different challenges. And, once again, the modern day male is different now than it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and 60 years ago. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree that the younger generation, very intuitive, very aware, very attuned and willing. They're a great population to work with.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, they don't see anything that's standing in their way, which is really exciting to see. Like, I learned from that at times for that,
Awesome. And, just can you mention some things about you're also this quintessential teacher, teaching pharmacists right now, your container of teaching functional pharmacy to many pharmacists all over the country. Could you say some things about that and how you're seeing that functional medicine movement from that perspective?
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. So, and this was, I created this almost as a challenge from you a little over a year ago. It's like, because I was like, I got this idea about beyond the labs, right? Because as we started in the practice, I was doing the labs and I was doing the protocols and stuff, and we didn't really open up to the men's at that point, but that's what I was doing, protocols. And the protocols are also nutrition, their medication, their lifestyle, and it's all that combination. So it was like, I could teach this, right? So I called it Beyond the Labs because, as I like to say, labs don't lie, but they don't tell the whole story. So I opened that up to pharmacists, and it really took off really nicely. And we've got a group of pharmacists in here that we call ourselves the other ones, because we do think differently. And as you know, in the way you and I practice, we've always practiced in the beyond functional approach. We know that people get off on the sexy tests and the sexy protocols and all that stuff, but it's beyond that. And our goal isn't to keep people in that space. It's actually to take them to the next level and what's really the internal drivers. So yeah, so the teaching's been amazing. It's, I think, 50 or 60 pharmacists now. A lot of them are really engaged, and they're stepping into their own practices and changing the way they practice or the way they've learned. Because a lot of them have done things like A4M and IFM. Now they're coming to this. It's like, wow. And much also to the credit of you, because, what's being taught is what you and I have come together on. And we've given each other these unique nuances. And I think, also to say that's going to be really exciting as, the Solar Medicine Institute also expands, because we're bringing something very special. What I've learned is practitioners want more of, and they want to be authentic, and they want to talk about tarot cards. They want to talk about, all these other aspects, solar flares. I mean, someone was talking about the other day in the chat. So, we are the product of everything that's around us. So that's what the teaching is, the container. And now it's expanding into a coaching and a mentorship. And it's just something I enjoy. It lights me up. And it's really fun to do. To see pharmacists who I've always tried to not be a pharmacist. I swear I wouldn't be a pharmacist in the year 2000. I've always said, I'm not like the rest of them, but I found some that are actually really cool, in the way they practice.
Awesome. So what can you tell us your hope for the modern man?
Yeah. To be able to stand in their own space, to be able to be that person who protects others, but also allows in and gives themselves what they need. To be that one when it feels that things are awry, that aren't in proper balance, to be able to speak up or take the steps to keep working at it. To be the one that's willing to face the pain and the discomfort, because that's one of the biggest things. Men never had that. Men don't have rituals in life. We've got faux, like fake rituals that they go through. But once again, it's recognizing that the pain is the portal, and it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be mental. It's all real. But, like they say, where you trip up in life, that is your gift. So I want men to understand that as well. They all have that gift, that elixir to burn back, but to recognize it might be in the dark edges of their life or what's been most challenging for them. So that's my hope, because once we can get through that, we're going to have a different society from men, I believe, which is going to, I think, work with that divine feminine as well.
That's so amazing. Can every single man sign up for this? Okay. That's so amazing. Thank you so much for talking about that. Any other plugs for the Apollo Way? I said the Apollo's Way, but it's the Apollo Way.
Yeah. So, you can always find us at K Corpus MD and through Soul of Medicine. Online right now, there's not a website up for it, but socially, Instagram, Man Unmedicated is the platform. But you can also find me, Rob Kress, FRX, and it's linked to that as well. But it's actually something I'm just starting to roll out to our current men in the program right now. So it's going to be a really quick beta test, and open up because it's ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you tell us real quick your favorite quote?
My favorite quote?
You're full of them.
Just the Jerry Garcia quote. Songline comes up, and I don't even know it's appropriate, but once in a while you're shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right.
Okay, Rob. Thank you so much, and looking forward to talking more about your program, and thanks again for being here.
Thanks for joining us on the Man Unmedicated podcast. If you're ready to take control of your health and join a community of men who are doing the same, head over to www.manunmedicated.com. And remember, true wellness isn't found in a pill bottle. It's built through real transformation. Until next time, keep pushing your peaks.